Jimbo.
Court is in session with Ryan in Sacktown on If You Don't Like That. Now, Ryan in Sacktown.
Oh, must be Rhino.
Chicken and dumplings today.
Holy moly, Jimbo.
What's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday. The Kings, Scott Perry, Vivek Ranadive, have given Jerry and I a ribeye to chew on. Doug Christie, the interim tag, coming off as the head coach of the Kings. I think it's a very interesting discussion that we are about to have, and we'll be joined by Jerry Reynolds here at the 4 o'clock hour. How lucky are we, by the way, to have Jerry? Hopefully you are celebrating with a nice hot plate.
Chicken and dumplings today.
Chicken and dumplings. It's that Tuesday. By the way, it's Jerry's favorite dish. So we acknowledge that around here.
Acknowledge me!
But again, an interesting discussion to have around this, because Doug Christie was 27-24 as head coach. There's a lot going on. Did some good things. Team didn't always show up. There was a lot going on behind the scenes too. One thing to
acknowledge me.
Scott Perry kept his word. He said a week for the coaching search. Despite his phone ringing off of the hook, well, 6 days, he did it. So the next question becomes press conference. Is it going to be one mic, two mics? Are we going to hear from Vivek? You know, we haven't heard from Vivek since I think that was the last public comment from him. So we'll dive into all of that today. Certainly want your reaction. Look, how do we filter through the result versus the process? That is the thing here that I think is holding things up. I, for one, and we've said it on this channel, Grant said it, I said it, expect Doug to be named your head coach. But for me, where does it go from here? Can Doug hire his own staff, which I'm sure he'll be able to do, and that's going to be, to me, the most important thing. Who is Doug going to bring on as his associate head coach? What is the sales pitch to come to Sacramento? So we'll talk about all that and more. Again, get in here. You can call the show. We'll have Jerry again, 4 o'clock. Looking forward to that. Hit the link that's in the chat if you want to call and discuss the news today. We will go through the timeline of how we got here, what Doug's done, and what's next for this Kings team. Not a good day, not a bad day. It's just another day here on the Kings Court. Happy to have you here on If You Don't Like That.
Late nights on the screen, hey, it's Grant and Ryan. We bleed purple, talking hoops, never lying. Sacramento Kings, we rise and we fall. If you don't like that, then you don't know ball. Jerry sitting with the stories of the game, spilling all the truth, driving legends insane. From the Cow Palace days to Arco's roar, this town's heart beats on the hardwood floor. If you don't like that, turn away now. Kings.
I can hear some of you right now.
Burn it down!
Burn it down! I don't think it's that bad. I get your argument. I get your beef. I get your grievance. But thanks for being here. We've got 2 shows today, beginning right now here on the Kings Court with Court in Session. Nape's back tonight. You will get his take on all this at 8 o'clock Pacific. Make sure you tune into that. You know, when we talked about this during the regular season, Grant said if the Kings didn't make the playoffs, they would clean house, including Doug Christie. And then as we saw Doug kind of work his way through some issues, especially the injuries at the end of the season, and again, the behind the scenes stuff, there is a lot to that as well. I think that made the water a little bit more murky. It made it more apparent that Doug might be retained. And here we are today, 6 days out. And many people, I guess here's the thing. If I came to you and I said, Doug Christie is going to coach this team and get a training camp to get a balanced roster, hopefully Scott Perry can do that. But if I said Doug's going to be the coach, he's going to build out his bench, I don't think a lot of people would have a big issue with that. In fact, I don't think a ton of people have an issue with Doug as the coach. I certainly don't. And I'm on the record saying that. I think it's more about the process. I think that you're worried that this is a boulder rolling downhill of backdoor decisions that are trying to be pulled like magic tricks in front of your eyes. How much does the conversation change? Let me ask you this. How much does the conversation change if Scott Perry and Doug Christie show up at the podium together when Scott Perry was introduced? Then I think it's a non-conversation. But instead, now it's, well, did the Kings interview anybody? How do we know who else was available? But when you take into account the situation, I don't know that there was a lot of better candidates available. And I, for one, I like that he's young. I like that he's a motivator, but you've got to have the backside to that. And I know a lot of people out there think X's and O's don't matter. Well, maybe they don't matter as much during the regular season, but as you're seeing right now in the playoffs, they matter. And we had a 1-game sample size of Doug in a winner game or win or go home situation. And Doug was thoroughly outclassed by Jason Kidd. It was his worst game, one of his worst games as coach of this team. So that's why I say you've got to get somebody in there with some experience. And we'll ask Jerry about that. Remember last week, Jerry said there's 3 or 4 players that he has come across during his time in basketball that he thought should go into coaching. And he said that to them, and Doug's one of them. So that gives some merit to Doug's name for me. I'm going to skip through the intro and how we got here and get straight to you in the chat since we have Jerry coming up, because I know you want to be heard. I want to get your reactions on all of this. Again, you are welcome to call the show as well as we continue to go through this. Look, I'm going to go through your comments. Let's kind of reset this from the beginning. So the night the Kings get bounced from the playoffs, we start hearing some whispers that Scott Perry is going to be the new GM. We hear about a meeting with the players that were remaining in the locker room that allegedly was called by Doug. The next morning, we have Scott Perry announced, we have reports of Scott Perry as the GM incoming. But then we have this period of like 3 or 4 days where it's nothing. We haven't gotten anything official, right? And then we get to the announcement. We get to the press conference. Scott Perry, sitting up there alone, introduced himself. The owner should have been next to him at the very minimum. Here's what Scott had to say in regards to the coaching search.
Do you have any idea what you're going to do with the coaching situation, whether it's Doug or you're going to open up to a full-fledged coaching search?
Well, you're looking at a guy who's a veteran of so many coaching searches, I can't even count them right now. But what I can tell you is I've spent time with Doug Christie already. I first met Doug Christie when he was a player at Toronto. So I admired him as a player, his career. I've watched him this year from afar in terms of his ability to have a presence on the court. I think he's made a connection with players. We've had a few conversations up to this point. He was one of the first people I met with yesterday when I got into town. So I've only been here a little longer than 24 hours. With that said, my phone has incessantly rang for interest in this job. So I'm going to have a few more conversations in and around about this job. And hopefully I can come to some sort of resolution within the next week or so in terms of having a decision or announcement to inform everybody of.
So it was weird that he gave us that week timeline, phone ringing off the hook. We didn't get reports of interviews, which was kind of different. But if you've been watching this channel, we've tried to set you up a little bit for what was coming. We've been pretty transparent that we both believed that Doug was headed back. And then if you listen to Doug's comments after the play-in game, they were pretty direct as well. Looking back at those, it seemed like a guy that knew he was going to get another shot.
This job going forward, what kind of reassurances or anything like that have you been given, and what do you expect that process to look like in the days or weeks to come?
Yeah, none, but yeah, this is where I want to be. I think you guys know that. I need to finish what I started. And that's the only reason that I ever even stepped onto the sideline from where I was at initially. Because I had to exercise some demons for myself, but more than anything is when you hear the narratives that are written by people who are not here and just have random stuff to say, it irks me because they don't know. It's an incredible fan base. It's an incredible organization. And when it's right and you're going around beating the hell out of people, not a lot of people got a lot to say then. But when you're getting your butt beat, they got a lot to say. And I feel you. But when that tide turns and the rabbit got the gun, then we'll see.
You're kind of obviously alluding to your own unknown future here, but it feels like there's a lot of, question marks in the air entering the offseason. How comfortable are you with, kind of if there was a decision to bring a lot of this core back also with yourself, that this group can be, kind of back?
I mean, when you talk roster construction, there's a lot there. I mean, you got to have a point guard in this league. There's a lot of different things. So that question, we could sit here and talk for a long time, but I love all these guys, like every single one of them. I know some of them are probably, they get upset because they don't play the minutes and different things, but that's the nature of our game and what we do. We have to create a culture that is that's highly competitive, but highly positive at the same time.
Boom. So it was pretty, that was fairly confident. Talking about your culture, talking about needing a point guard. Pretty simple stuff. And Doug did not lose the locker room. I saw a comment there, 7-13. How about injuries? How about losing Malik Monk? How about not having a point guard? Now, I'm not excusing some of the decisions Doug made, but I also see some comments in there talking about blitzing the point guard. That did not start with Doug. That started with Luke Laux, who ended up leaving for Florida State. That was not a Doug thing. Luke was doing that early in the season. So Doug went back to it at certain times, didn't necessarily agree with it like you didn't. But that was not a Doug scheme. As for the contract, it's being reported it's a multi-year deal that they're working with. Doug is also represented by Clutch, Andy Miller with Clutch. So really what it comes down to is it looks like this last week has been about negotiations on the contract and not so much looking for other coaches. Now, my next question becomes, do you wait another 6 days, another 8 days to try to pull the wool over the fan base's eyes to announce Doug's staff? Or does that happen immediately? Again, I don't think the result here is the problem. I think the problem is the process. And I get it. We're at the right place, but I understand your concern. of how we got there and how that impacts where this team is going. But at the end of the day, I'm all right with Doug being here. So we're going to talk some more about that. Jerry Reynolds with us at 4 p.m. Looking forward to having him on. By the way, some of you took something that Jerry said last week out of context. Jerry said that Domantas Sabonis is the best big man in Sacramento Kings history. He did not say he is the best big man in the NBA. I got a sniff of that from Grant's show last night. It turned into a point of conversation. So I'll let Jer clear that up when he comes on at 4. But Jerry did not say the best big man in the NBA. He named different names within the Kings organization going back to Rochester and said that Domas is the best to date. Ralph, thanks for taking the time.
Hey, Rhino, good to talk to you. I like you said, I don't have an issue with the product. It's more the process. But what is kind of discouraging, and you would agree with this, right? That we're definitely closer to being fighting for the playoffs than being contender, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that seems obvious, right? But I just feel like since we're kind of in that middle stage, and it looks like Scott Perry is not gonna be retooling or retooling, not rebuilding. I don't feel like he's gonna be the one. He's gonna be the coach. He's the more Mark Jackson before Steve Kerr. That's why I don't feel like he's gonna be here, because it's really he's not gonna be the one leading us. So he's gonna end up being fired because he's gonna be taking all the bumps and the bruises still before we, if ever, get to where we want to be, which is the championship team. That's why I'm like, I wish they would have kept him more as an assistant. That means he's kind of doomed to he's gonna be failing anyways. That's what's hard. And he loves Sacramento, but he's gonna end up getting fired.
Well, what are you saying? He's going to end up getting fired because we're going off of recent history with Kings coaches, or do you think it's because of the way the team's being managed? Lost Ralph.
I think I look at Mike Malone, who was the championship coach. Can you hear me okay? I look at Mike Malone, who was fired. I look at Jenkins, who was fired. I look at Budenholzer and Frank Vogel, who won a championship. Even championship coaches can get fired. So, meaning, if it's just a stepping stone, and this roster is so far away from being built, I feel like he is more in that middleman Mark Jackson type role before we ever get there. And that's why I wish he would have went back to the assistant role. He just doesn't have the cards to play with and everything like that. I mean, so I just think it's more likely he's not going to be here when we eventually win a championship, hopefully in our lifetime, if that part makes sense.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I totally hear you, brother. Hey, Ralph, thanks for the call. Appreciate your opinion on this. Good job by Ralph. If you would like to call like Ralph, just hit the link. Would love to hear from you. We can talk about it. So Michelle Dapper, who I talked about yesterday on the show, I aired a grievance on myself. She asked Scott Perry about whether or not he was going, and this was after Whitey asked Scott Perry if he was going to be making the decisions, right? So he kind of ducked the question. Michelle follows up. Here's what Scott had to say.
Scott, Michelle again, over here in the back. Just curious.
Oh, okay.
Right here.
All right.
With all this, just how closely are you going to be working with Vivek with all of these decisions? Has he given you full control to say, I'm going to hire the coach, I'm going to add these players to the roster, or do you plan to work with him?
Obviously, Vivek owns the team, and I've worked with Vivek before, and I enjoy a very healthy and positive relationship with him. But make no mistake, he has empowered me to lead this team and make critical decisions. Now, will I talk to him often about different things in this team? Absolutely. It only makes sense. There's a saying that will be prevalent throughout my tenure here and within our office. I want diversity of thought, but with unity of purpose. And that's what we're going to be led by. And so that starts with my relationship.
I disagree, AP. So I guess with what he said there, and Doug being hired as the coach, he's kind of playing the middle ground, right? He's stuck to the timeline, but this feels like a situation where it came from somewhere else, much like Vivek Ranadive's decision, or the decision from Vivek and his advisors to fire Mike Brown was put on Monty McNair. Okay. Here's my take on it. This is not an official report. Here's my take. Scott Perry, Doug Christie is going to be your coach. You want the job. I think that is how it went down. We've talked about it on this show. We've talked about it together with Grant. We've talked about it with all of you. So the line for me starts right now. This was an expected result for me. But Scott Perry should be up there. If there is a press conference, as there should be, if Doug is going to be the head coach. And I want to see if from this point forward, what Scott Perry said about making decisions is true. I want to see if we see different moves made that are not, that really line up as a Vivek move, like a Zach LaVine. You know, a Jake LaRavia, not a Vivek move. That was a Monty McNair move. Valanciunas, that was a Monty McNair move. LaVine, that was a Vivek move. So I guess how Scott answers the questions about this process, how he makes decisions going forward, I think what this does, it settles some from the aspect of knowing Doug, knowing how much the game means to him, knowing how Doug played the game. There's going to be a level of expectation that this fan base will have, that this team come out and compete, win, lose, or draw. You're diving on the floor. You're going for loose balls. You're hustling. You've got that standpoint. But now on the flip side of that, you've got the anxiety of who's driving the ship. Because everything that Scott Perry said, I mean, except the timetable to hire a new coach, everything he said has not been true in terms of operating with autonomy. So that time will only tell the answer to that about whether or not he operates with autonomy. Scott Perry, my phone is ringing off the hook already for the coaching job. Yeah. Well, again, okay. So this is where, and I want to ask Jerry Reynolds this. If you're Doug Christie, what's the sales pitch? What is it to get a top level assistant who's been there before, who has been a head coach, who's an X's and O's guy? It matters. And you know what Doug Christie was talking about? A competitive, but also positive culture. I know I'm not saying it exactly right. He's going back to what ultimately ended Mike Brown's days here in Sacramento.
You know, one of the things that we're continuing to talk about with our guys is we can't be bored stacking plays the right way. And what I mean by that is we don't need the home run steal. We don't need the home run three. We just need to be methodical by stacking or playing the right way, possession after 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 possession.
In many ways, if you take the LaVine decision out of it and you look at how we got to where we're at right now, firing Mike Brown, no issue with it. I think it was actually the right move. The extension, that's another story. And by the way, Napes was right about that. Said shouldn't give him an extension. He gets one. Okay? But it was how Mike Brown was fired. Okay? That was the problem. Sacramento wants to be taken seriously. There's a reason Domantas Sabonis gets snubbed. There's a reason Malik Monk gets snubbed. And it's because of what some of you are saying. This was not a desired coaching job. You're acting like it is a highly desired coaching job. If you had any illusions that Taylor Jenkins was coming through the door, it wasn't going to happen. So that's why I go back to the pool of candidates, and I do think Doug being probably the best. And by the way, your guys that matter, the core of your team, Levine, for better or worse, he has Doug's back. He wants him. Sabonis wants Doug. So it does make sense. But going back to my original point, you didn't make the national news for firing Mike Brown. You made the national news for how you fired Mike Brown. That's what the Kings got killed for. Same thing with Scott Perry's hiring. Before Monty McNair is even, I guess they mutually decide to part ways, you already have somebody in place. So what do you get? You get roasted by the national media. Now you have Scott Perry step up to the podium. My phone's ringing off the hook for this coaching job or for this job. Yet I'm going to put 6 days on it. I'm going to give you 7 days. It's going to take me 2 to 3 weeks to interview all of the staff to see who's going to stay in the front office. But I'm going to handle this phone that will not stop ringing, get those interviews lined up, and have the best person for this job right to you in 7 days. Right? And so now you don't even, by all accounts, do any other interviews. Again, right move, I think, bringing Doug back. But the process was the problem. And so I get that it builds the Vivek anxiety. I get that it builds the distrust. Scott Perry, even though he's tried to start off on a good foot, has not. It's transparency. I mean, how much of a different conversation are we having? If that day that Scott Perry was introduced, you've got Vivek Ranadive, Scott Perry, and Doug Christie sitting at the table. We are having a different conversation. But because that would be the right way to run a franchise, we are getting what we're getting now in terms of a split fan base on what's right, what's wrong, what's going to happen next with the players. I think you have some really good pieces, but you have got some very difficult decisions to make. So give me your take on it. We're going to keep going through the comments again. Jerry Reynolds joins us at 4:00. Can't wait to have Jerry on with us. Doug Christie returning as head coach of the Kings, not unexpected. Something that we were heavily expecting to come down. Came down today, earlier this morning, via Shams. How does Shams always get these things, man? Shams always gets the reports. I wonder how Shams does it. Very interesting. And how about these people that are going out and buying, like Woj? Somehow his phone that he used to break, I think it was a LeBron story, ended up on an auction block. Why would you want that phone? I just don't get it. But anyways, we've been talking Doug. Here's the most important thing. This is literally the most important thing. It's Doug's staff. Who's it going to be? My guess is Vivek. Okay. Well, a lot of you brought up Mark Jackson. A lot of you have brought that up. If Mark Jackson became the lead assistant here, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I do know that the perception from this fan base is going to elevate where you're already at in terms of a frustration level. But I think you need a Terry Stotts. I think you need a Scott Brooks. You got to have somebody. You're not going to get a Jeff Van Gundy. Let's just put it that way. Jeff Van Gundy ain't walking through that door. But you've got to have a guy like that sitting second chair to you. How about Dave Yeager? I know he's been here before. I don't know. I know that exit wasn't great. But there are good guys out there. But why would you want to come to Sacktown? Right? And let's say this. If we're playing a lot of hypotheticals here, but because of the way this is played out, and again, we're acknowledging right result, bad process. If Mark Jackson is hired on as the associate head coach, does that mean that Doug's not building his staff out? So how do you build your staff out from there if you're Doug? Well, it really wasn't my decision to have Mark. Got to get behind it, though, act like it's yours, and build down and down. Because the likelihood is Doug's going to be on a short leash. Grant said that. I'm not sure that I completely agree with it, but I agree with it enough to put it out there. And this is the other thing that Doug's going to have to balance. Scott Perry talked about having a defensive team, talked about athleticism, talked about length. Here was your balancing test last year. It was balancing the offense with the defense. It was mixing in where you can. And I think it starts with DeMar DeRozan. DeMar DeRozan is probably going to be the one piece that I would be looking at moving first, especially to a team like the Rockets, a team possibly like the Bucks, a team like Oklahoma City, if they fall short here in the playoffs. We'll talk about the playoffs, by the way, with Jerry Reynolds coming up in just a little bit. Domantas Sabonis. A lot of you talking about moves that involve Ja Morant, Zion Williamson. I'm hearing Portland possibly getting into the Zion market, if there's a market, which I could never see, actually. I don't see Portland trading Donovan Clingan. That's their dude. That's who they wanted on a good contract. They're not trading him. But again, your last move for Zach LaVine put this offseason in a completely different direction than you thought you would be headed. You thought there was going to be two different forks in the road. There was going to be a complete rebuild, or there was going to be a retool because of a De'Aaron Fox trade. Bringing on Zach LaVine's contract changed absolutely everything for this team, because now you really don't have the opportunity to rebuild. Scott Perry saying that we are trying to basically be competitive. You have to. There's nothing else that you can do. You say Jay Triano as associate head coach. I'm talking associate head coach. Yes, we will talk about that as well here in a little bit. I doubt that. Remember, that was Mike Brown's staff. I don't know that Triano, who should have been lined up as the associate head coach to Mike Brown to take over for Mike Brown, I don't know that Triano is going to be on his way back. And again, there's a lot to unpack from this last season that really, at this point, does not make a lot of sense of getting into. We've talked about some of those things. I just don't see Triano coming back. Best bet is to get former Kings involved. Yeah, right. Just keep rebuilding the Kings wheel. We'll see. Look, in some ways, that's what makes it brilliant because it splits the fan base. If you are so frustrated, if you are over the age of 40 and you are incredibly frustrated with Vivek Ranadive, yet Doug Christie is your head coach, I think you're still going to be supporting the team despite what Vivek does because Doug's in that seat. It's the nostalgia. It's what Doug stands for. It's the memories. If it's Joe Schmo, who's coached 2 other NBA teams, never been to the playoffs, I think your patience would be a lot lower. So in some ways, it's very smart. It's not a coincidence that you have seen a parade of Kings from the best era of Kings basketball during my lifetime and probably during most of your lifetimes being just put on TV, being put at half court. There's a reason for that. Just like when you go to the movies. And by the way, like 90 minutes of movie previews these days, it's got to be better than that. You got to do better now that you can get a preview anywhere. But before the movie starts, they show that roller coaster where you're going by the popcorn that's popping into the coaster cart. Then you go around the Coke that's overflowing, right? That's exactly what parading the old Kings in front of you is. So, yeah, he also has a ton of problems. Should approach Stan Van Gundy for associate head coach. Most likely doesn't do it. I don't mind that name. I like that name a lot, actually. Mike Bibby has a job. Zion never plays. No to Morant. None of those candidates will want to get into this dumpster fire in an assistant role under Doug. Well, not so fast, my friend, as Lee Corso would say. You might have guys that look at it the other way. They might see it as a stepping stone because of Doug's short experience as a head coach. If he's on a short leash, that might be your job pretty soon. So you got to look at it that way as well. Can't imagine getting paid millions to be a GM in the NBA, knowing the GM is really running or knowing they're not running things. Well, okay, again, think about what the Kings did last time with the Monty McNair and Mike Brown hires. Think about how that was conducted. You had this independent committee, right? Think about how these last 2 hires have been conducted. They're the complete opposite of that. Complete opposite. The idea was to get Vivek away from the decisions. You have now hired a GM while employing a GM and brought Doug back, which again, right move in my opinion, but you brought him back without, by all accounts, interviewing any other coaches. And you have a GM that says he's operating autonomously. I don't know. B4. The staff will be Lamb's barber, and Vivek's uncle. Fair enough. Happy you are here with us. Don't forget, I know a lot of you want to get Grant's take on things today. He's back tonight, 8 o'clock. He will be talking about today's events with Doug Christie. And really now, attention shifts to a press conference that certainly, in my opinion, should be held with, at minimum, Scott Perry and Doug Christie up there. And I think Scott should be taking some questions as well. I don't think it should be just a Doug question thing. But imagine if they didn't do a press conference. And I'm not asking you to really stretch your imagination. They didn't do one when Mike Brown was fired for 40 some days, but you would get a press conference. It's building Doug's staff out, and then it's draft process. It's, are we trying to get back into the first round? Are we going to live with the 42nd pick? I know you have a 3.2% 6% chance of keeping the 12th pick. So it's likely not going to be here in Sacramento. And then it's about making moves. So a lot on the plate of this front office. A lot on the plate of this front office and head coach Doug Christie. And the Kings continue to get killed across national media. Bobby Marks.
Sacramento fans deserve better. Because you do.
How about Brian Windhorst? He didn't hold back either. Here's Wendy.
All this change say to you, Brian, about the state of the franchise?
Because it's not a good organization. I mean, I wish Scott Perry the best. He's our former colleague, very strong executive. Domantas Sabonis gave his exit interview today.
Yes.
And they said, what do you need to do in the offseason? He said, we need to get a point guard. They just had a franchise point guard.
That Scott Perry was there in the lead up to drafting.
That they let the relationship go south on. I'm sure everybody's got their story, but the relationship went south. They had the executive of the year. The relationship went south. He knew he was getting fired because they already had Scott Perry hired. He knew for weeks he was getting fired. His assistant, Wes Wilcox, left weeks ago to take another job when he was a big part of their rebuild. How many coaches did they go through in Sacramento over the last 17 years? They finally found a coach who put them on the right path in Mike Brown. They liked him so much, they gave him a contract extension last summer, and they fired him 2 months into the season. This is the definition of why they have been a bagged organization for decades. And maybe this new alignment will work. Maybe Doug Christie will work. Maybe they will get another point guard. Just look what they did. Like, I like Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan as people. I like them as players. They can be successful. They were very clearly a poor pairing in Chicago. It did not work. Not for 5 minutes over the course of years. The Bulls moved on from both. The Kings brought them in. They had an alignment that worked, and they imported a pairing that didn't work and is very expensive. They had it in front office that was working. They disenfranchised them and drove them out of town. What are we doing here? Like, okay, maybe it will work going forward, but why would you have faith in it? Why would you have faith in the decision-making from the top? This is not an opinion. This is a reaction to the results that we can actually see.
So that's the national media before today, with Doug being announced as the head coach. Again, I'm with it. I'm with Doug being the coach. I'm happy for Doug. I think that his 27-24 record during his time with the team was good. They started out hot. They were 13-10 in clutch games. 6-13 under Brown. They finished bad. They had injuries. The last taste in your mouth, that Dallas game, I can't imagine if you paid money to go to that game. I agree with you. And this guy doesn't even know basketball about De'Aaron Fox. Was not a true point guard. Yes, this front office, and that's to me one of the most interesting things that I want to talk to Jerry Reynolds about, which Jerry will be joining us here in about 20 or about 15 minutes now. This obsession with these in-between guards that aren't point guards, that are not two guards, does that obsession now leave the franchise now that McNair is out? Or does that stay in the franchise with Scott Perry? Everybody's on the same page. You need a point guard, but we can't seem to come to a definition here in Sacramento of actually what a point guard is. If you want to look at the statistics, here they are on the season. To your left are the statistics under Mike Brown. To your right are the statistics under Doug Christie, not including the play-in game. Tay hopping in. Doug is a motivator and players coach. He is indeed. Let's give him a chance. There must be a reason the players wanted him back. Well, okay, so when Doug talked to the media commonly, and I've said this on so many different platforms, he talked about the importance of teaching your team how to play instead of teaching them a play. That made sense for the 5 games that he had De'Aaron Fox on the roster, because that group had been together for so long. Mike Brown made things a little too complicated. In fact, I would say Mike Brown dug his heels in and complicated things more this year. And maybe that's because of DeMar DeRozan and trying to balance out this idea of pace and balance out the idea of isolation basketball. So once that left and you get Zach LaVine in and you get Valanciunas in, you got to have a little more structure, and it really just was not there, to be quite honest with you. And here's the other thing. Look who's playing decent basketball right now, or was until they got bounced out last night. Davion Mitchell. Davion Mitchell had been playing decent basketball, and he came from a college where it was extremely structured at Baylor. You know the same person that came from a college that's extremely structured? That would be Keegan Murray. So it'll be interesting to see who gets highlighted and who ends up on this roster under Doug. Can Doug be like Eric Spo eventually? Meaning learning the X's and the O's? Sure. I mean, that's going to come with time, but that's also got to be with trust. Doug would get, I don't want to say defensive, but anytime the media towards the end of the season would be asking about the season, he drew a hard line in the sand between the season where he had been coaching and the season where Mike Brown had been coaching. I understand that, but then also when he'd be asked about different things, I'm the head coach. I'm the head coach. So another thing to consider, we always talk about, usually it's you hire a GM, the GM hires a coach. Those two need to be on the same page. We don't know. Maybe Doug Christie and Scott Perry are very much on the same page. If Scott Perry's name was already leaking before the players left the locker room for the play-in game, or from the play-in game, who's to say that Doug didn't know he was already coming back? Maybe they do have a good relationship. They're on the same page. Maybe they've had talks already. We don't know these things. Only time will tell. Again, go back to the product is fine in terms of the result, but the process has been a nightmare. What are your thoughts, by the way, on the playoffs last night? How about the scrappiness between Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, and yeah, I'm going to say his name, Dylan Brooks last night? Incredible stuff. The Warriors have the Rockets on the ropes right now. Can we call Vivek the curse? Look, there's a lot of things you can point to. There's no doubt there's a lot of things you can point to when it comes to Vivek. But I think we also need to counterbalance this idea that because the Kings were the 3 seed and made the playoffs one season out of 18, that all of a sudden this team was back. We were all guilty of it. We're like, oh, the window's open. This team is a couple moves away. I think we also need to take a step back and realize that season was an outlier. It was 100% unexpected. Nobody saw it coming, including Monty McNair and Mike Brown. And we have been in a rebuilding process this entire time. I think this has always been a rebuild now, if I have to take a step back and look at it. You just happen to have a good year where you got some good luck and you made more threes. So I don't know that Vivek's the curse. I mean, but it certainly looks like we are back to the older style of operating. And if you're a season ticket holder, how are you feeling today? Or is this a good move in your eyes? Bad move? Season Mike Brown was coaching the only other years after the players were calling the plays. Yeah, it's a good point. Mike Brown is on the record saying that he called most of the plays 22, 23, and then let the players call them the following year. The window was open. Then you ran it back with no moves, then fire the head coach. Yeah, I think that is probably the way Monty McNair will be remembered. It's the moves he didn't make as opposed to the moves that he did make. I use the analogy, if Monty McNair was playing blackjack and he had 20 and the dealer was showing an ace, he would pay the insurance and get half of his bet back. I think that's the way that I think about it. You didn't keep up with the rest of the NBA and you saw teams pass you by that you were ahead of in the standings at the trade deadline. Other than the Zach LaVine trade, which clearly it smells, it reeks of Vivek Ranadive, the Kings transactions this year were not bad. You can argue with me about Devin Carter. I'll take that argument because it's too early to tell with Devin Carter. So I'll take that argument on. But as for the other transactions, they were all pretty darn solid. It's just the way things were handled. And that is really the principal hangup right now between this fan base. Let's see. I like Russell in Denver. Okay, so you're talking about point guards. Well, again, your best shot at getting a decent point guard. That's why I'm saying pay attention to the teams that underachieve in the playoffs. Pay attention to that. Because just like you saw Mike Brown get fired, this new CBA has changed everything in the NBA. It's turned the NBA on its head. So you are going to see a shorter tolerance, a shorter leash for most coaches in the NBA. Doesn't matter who you are. Well, maybe Popovich, and I hope he is doing well. I just hope he's well, period. We shouldn't even be talking about him in basketball. Eric Spoelstra, he's going to have a leash, even though they get bounced from the playoffs, get swept out. But you're going to see teams turn over coaches and turn over star players quicker because the window to win is much smaller, and the consequences of going all in can set your franchise back for years. So the Kings were kind of ahead of the curve by firing Mike Brown. That's it. So Vivek's sitting there. He's like, all right, now I'm warmed up. That was the right move. Zach LaVine, we don't know yet. We'll see. And that's the other thing. A true point guard could really change things around here in Sacramento. It's the one you can honestly say it is the one ingredient this team has not had in 3 years. The one ingredient. How does it change things? In fact, you can make the argument that most of your Kings were playing out of position through the last 3 years of the Beam Team era, of whatever you want to call it. I believe it's restricted. I don't know. I've got the graphic. We can go over it in a bit. Jerry Reynolds joining us here in about 5 minutes. If you have any questions for Jerry, let us know. Put them in the chat, and we will get to as many of those as we can. What is the lottery draw? Dennis, I would expect you to know the lottery draw. Kings burned up most of their second-round picks this year. Yeah, you're right, Peter. You are right. But if that pick goes to Atlanta, as it most likely will, the Kings will have their first-round picks starting next year. So the second-round picks, they did. I think it was the right move, though. Look at what you got back. You have security in Valanciunas, and let's say you had takers. Let's say you had takers for some of that's the bottom of the roster. I want the meat of the roster. Where's the meat of the roster? That is not it. There we go. Let's say you had suitors for Zach LaVine and Domantas Sabonis, hypothetically, and you could get fair return. I'm good with those second-round picks for what I have Valanciunas for. You've got him through 26, 27, $10 million. It's a great contract. Same thing with Malik Monk. Great contract there. Those are the contracts that I am looking to hang on to if I'm the Kings. Devin Carter, obviously team-friendly, rookie deal. But, your DeMar DeRozans, we know the fit. We know the issue there that we saw this year. And DeMar played his heart out. But Keegan Murray, he's going to be, and he already said on his exit interview, he's going to be seeking an extension, or at least seeking talks for an extension. And the entire thing around the team option with Keon Ellis, it's not as clear as everybody thinks. There are some consequences to the Kings picking up that option, although it's only, I believe, $2.3 million. So if you were able to get the big contracts off the books, you have the pieces to probably stay somewhat competitive, but also do that rebuild that you need to get some of those picks back. But I do think it does start with DeMar DeRozan. That's where this starts. If I am Scott Perry, that is where the conversations start. Zach LaVine ain't going nowhere. He's not. Sabonis, I think he's a niche trade. I say no on Morant as well. Valanciunas was the best trade. I actually think Valanciunas was a bigger trade than Zach LaVine. Because with Zach LaVine, you brought in, because we saw the Kings operate without De'Aaron Fox, because Fox was out because of injury. We had this sample size of 120 some minutes where the numbers are way above the Kings' averages with De'Aaron out of the starting lineup and Keon in it. And it was because of ball movement. And it was because of balance. You now had multiple players on the floor that could switch defensively. And then you've put Fox back in the mix, and it kind of complicates things. And with Fox relying so much on the three-pointer, he relied on the three-pointer so much that it's almost like he just became a three-pointer for the last, or a three-point shooter for the last season and a half. So in reality, you exchanged De'Aaron Fox for the same version of a player that could just shoot the three better, but he didn't do it better here in Sacramento. But you lose the basketball IQ, you lose the speed, you lose the playmaking. So that is where I just don't think LaVine really made a ton of sense. But again, with a point guard, maybe it does. Sabonis to New York for Josh Hart and Anunoby. You've been saying that for a while. I don't know. New York, we'll see what New York does in the playoffs. New York got a friendly call. We're going to talk to Jerry about the ref issues as well. But we were talking the big news of the day. Doug Christie retained as head coach of the Kings. Interim tag removed. We await news on whether or not there's going to be a press conference. Again, just sum up the first hour. It's the right move. Just, I believe the process has not been to par for the fan base. It's been worrisome for the fan base. So what level of autonomy is Doug going to have to build his staff? What's Doug's pitch going to be here to build his staff? What kind of coaches do you need to attract? And the point guard position, again, that is the big question that's up in the air. Do we no longer a playmaking point guard if we somehow get LaVine off the team? No, you definitely still need a true point guard if you get LaVine off the team. Yeah, Shaq is coming to Sacramento as I'm not sure how much time Shaq will be in Sacramento. Let's put it that way. But he is volunteering his services as the GM for Sacramento State basketball. You see this big rush going on right now of colleges hiring GMs. I heard Grant asking last night, what is the point of colleges hiring GMs? You've got to manage the NIL. It is basically minor league sports. You have free agents. Every player is a free agent each season. And right now, it's the Wild West. So you're seeing these schools, because it's not going to be like this forever. You are seeing these schools trying to leverage the process right now and get things in place. So when it comes time to address a fix to the college sports and the NIL problem, you have these GMs already in place as an argument there. So it's really interesting stuff, but a lot of attention on Mike Bibby and a lot of attention on that program. And also a lot of attention on the big news that Doug Christie has been retained as the head coach of the Kings. Interim tag has been removed. We are lucky on any Tuesday to be joined by Coach Reynolds, but especially on a Tuesday with such big news here in Sacktown. Coach, how you doing today, buddy?
Doing pretty good. Beautiful day here in Roseville, and I haven't taken a walk yet, so I got caught doing little honeydews and stuff like that. You
got to do those honeydews.
Yeah, I'm a psychologically broken man. I got to do what I'm told.
You're killing me, Jer. All right, big news of the day. Doug Christie coming back as head coach. A lot of fans talking about the process, but the result seems to be the right one to me, Jerry.
Yeah, I think so. I thought he did a very good job under almost impossible circumstances. Obviously, the play-in game, that was a disaster, and so that leaves a bad taste. But he was the same guy that coached wins against Detroit and Cleveland at the end of the season on the road, and he had two separate kind of interim teams to coach. And in my mind, he had a roster that just didn't fit very well, and so I think Doug deserves the opportunity, and hopefully they can make adjustments to the roster to give him a better chance to succeed.
Jerry, did you have any issue with the process in terms of the way that Scott Perry was hired? He gave us the timeline of 7 days to get a coach in here. And by all accounts, didn't look like a lot of interviews happened, or at least were reported to have happened. Any reason for concern for the fans over that?
It disturbed me, to be honest with you. I mean, you get rid of a general manager, Monty McNair, who had been executive of the year a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Now things certainly went bad, just like with Mike Brown, who'd been coach of the year. To me, if there's ever a time, certainly with the general manager hiring, and I like Scott Perry. I think he's a good, solid basketball man, good personality, good person, well experienced. He's never been the top guy on a franchise.
Right.
He's been with a lot of different franchises as a second guy or third guy or whatever. So I don't have a problem with the hiring there, but you would have thought it'd been the perfect time to have a real search. You might still come up with the same guy. And I think even the same way with Coach Christie, I think it wouldn't have hurt to have a bit of a search. I mean, you don't play any games for a day or two that I know of. So it does. Yeah, it no question. It just reams of that fact that the owner made probably the decisions, maybe not on the coach, but I would say it certainly, since nobody was even interviewed, you'd have to think that certainly leans that way.
Would it have changed things, do you think, if Scott Perry walked up to the podium with Doug Christie?
Well, I don't know. I think that that's what they need to do. I don't know that it changes anything. I think it's a case now where Doug's the coach and Scott's the GM, and so it's up to them. However, it was arranged. Whoever made the decisions in both guys, if maybe one, maybe the same guy, but anyway, they have to get along, and they're two different jobs. I always say is having kind of had bits and pieces of both of them is that the coach, he's just looking for what helps him win tomorrow, the next game.
Sure.
General manager has to think in terms of long term, the franchise, what's best for the franchise. So sometimes there's conflicts, but they've got to try to find a way to get on the same page and stay there.
So we've talked about, and by the way, Jerry Reynolds joining us, very grateful for that. We've talked about some names that we thought might be good fits for Doug's staff, especially in the associate head coach position. If you're Doug Christie now, what's your pitch to the coaches that you're seeking out to come to Sacramento?
Well, I mean, I do think that in my mind, it'd be nice to see if he could get somebody that's been a head coach with had success. I mean, certainly you see Terry Stotts at Golden State. I mean, Nate McMillan and Scotty Brooks. Now, certainly Scotty he's a California kid. He's been an assistant coach. He was an assistant coach with the Kings, and obviously he's a successful head coach. That'd be a name for me that now he's got a job and you might not want to leave, but there again, I mean, maybe as the top guy, more money. Usually money's the factor. So, but I mean, I think it's that kind of thing, to get, because Doug's a young coach who's this past year will kind of be good for him going forward. He had a lot of experience in a short time, but having somebody next to you that's been there, done it at a high level, and is your guy, that which that's also very important. I mean, especially in today's staff, you need a couple of guys that are truly your guys. The staffs are so big, which can lead itself to a lot of different agendas.
Explain that a little bit more. I think that's interesting what you just said.
Well, I think it's just like in probably any job circumstance, you got a whole lot of people on a staff or in your workforce that would really like to have your job.
True.
And so what you want is somebody that has had your job and really doesn't want it. I always say that was one of the things that I think was good relationship with Jeff Petrie and myself is Jeff knew I'd had that job. I didn't want it. I was more than happy to work for him and with him and support him.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Jerry joining us. So you don't know this, but there was a little bit of controversy from last week's segment. There were some fans that watched it and came away with the idea that you thought Domantas Sabonis is the best big man in the NBA. Jerry, the way I remember it is the best big man in the history of the Kings.
Yeah, the best center.
Yes.
The best center, not even the best big man, because
there you go.
I think there's a couple of power forward types, Chris Webber being one, and Jerry Lucas being another, that I would rate above Domas for sure. But no, he's the best starting center. And if anybody feels differently, name them. LaSalle Thompson, Olden Polynice, Vlade Divac. No, he's better than those guys. His career proves it to date. Sam Lacey was the second best for the old Kansas City Kings, and I think he made the All-Star team one time, and never played on a team that won more than 45. But fans in Kansas City kind of drove him out, and so they went from being 45 win team to 25 win team, and then they decided, boy, he was pretty good.
Should have kept him. Kind of like the Grizzlies said.
I don't know why they got rid of him. But no, just as simple as that. Just I followed the team since they were the Cincinnati Royals before they became the Kings, and there's no doubt that Domas is the best center that the Kings have ever had. Doesn't mean that he'll be the best you ever have, but since it's been 50 years, you want to be careful. When you move him, you want to be very careful.
So I'm going to ask a nuanced question here, and I know you'll understand the line because when this came back up on Grant's show last night, DeMarcus Cousins' name came up. Would you say that DeMarcus Cousins was the most talented center in Sacramento?
Yes, no question. I mean, actually, probably DeMarcus had more talent than Weber, but obviously there's issues that where his talent didn't translate to any level of winning, and all kinds of issues on and off the floor. So that's it's a shame. I mean, I think DeMarcus had Hall of Fame talent.
Wow.
But what happened has happened, and we've seen. I always say that's one thing about it. For every player you see that's all-star caliber or makes all-stars, there's 2 or 3 of equal talent that don't do it for different reasons. Lack of work ethic, lack of development, wrong spot, wrong attitude. There's all kinds of possibilities. And but yeah, DeMarcus, marvelous talent, just quite honestly, most of it wasted.
Yeah, and you really can't say it was the wrong time either. Fans argue that, well, he didn't have the pieces around him. I mean, the Kings catered to DeMarcus as much as they could, but he came into the league right when it was starting to swing more to the big man on the perimeter, Jer.
Yeah. Actually, the style of play probably fit him perfectly. And I mean, it's just a case, honestly, where those that want to see it differently, that there's no doubt that his best time was with the Kings and didn't work, but he bounced around the league, and a lot of it, the Warriors had him, the Lakers had him, Denver had him, Coach Malone, but none of them brought him back. So at some point, you're just preaching to the choir to think otherwise.
Yeah, but that speaks to his talent. That those coaches at that level still gave him another chance with all of that.
Yeah, each time. I mean, it finally ran out. It's like anything. It's like he was so talented. Each of those spots thought, well, he's so good. I can make it work.
Yep.
And
exactly.
At the end of the year, they'd say, well, no. And then next team would belly up to the bar and say, I can. And I always remember a story when I was doing TV, and Alvin Gentry at that time was coaching the Suns. And he told me, we'd been friends for a while, and he told me, he said, man, I'd like to be able to trade and get Cousins. I know I could really coach that guy. He said, I said, Alvin, be careful what you wish for. and they did he finally got him in New Orleans.
Oh, wow, that's right.
And then I remember him coming up and saying, man, I should have listened to you. He said, man, the guy's a marvelous talent, but I can't coach you. He said, I can't.
I am sure that that's not the only time somebody's come up to you and said, man, I should have listened to Jerry. Tristan, our resident smart, Sabonis, best big man in the NBA. Got it, Jerry.
I never said that. Tristan, pay attention.
Yeah, come on, Tristan.
Come on.
Dennis, so Jerry, you see Domas as a 5. Jerry, 4. Give me a mold of a 4 next to Sabonis.
Well, there's certainly probably the perfect guy would be Jaren Jackson of Memphis. He can block shots. He shoots threes. He's not a particularly good rebounder, but he is a good defender. And he's long, 6'11".
Mm-hmm.
So that would say, now, is he gettable? Probably not. I'd say the one that might be gettable, that might be maybe equally valuable differently, would be Naz Reid at Minnesota. 6'11" and long, and can guard centers or forwards, block shots, shoots the 3-ball extremely well. And I think either one of those guys, if you could get them, probably makes team 5-7 games better team right off the bat.
It's a big improvement. 5 to 7 games puts you in a much better spot this year. A couple chances to make the play-in at the very minimum.
Yeah. And I think that's the scary part is, you're going to have to get consistently better probably just to make the play and much less move into the playoff caliber with the way the West is. And you got the teams behind you like Portland and especially San Antonio that are probably going to be making a charge up the ladder.
100%. I am with you. And they don't have a ton of resources to work with. It's pretty universally known at this point by the front office, fan base, and coaching staff. The Kings need a point guard. Jerry, how would you define the point guard that the Kings need?
Well, I think they need, a guy who certainly can make plays. I mean, legitimately can break down defenses and make plays. I mean, use De'Aaron Fox as an example. Obviously, was the most talented player on the team. He wasn't a true point guard, but he was a playmaker and a lead guard, and that type of thing you could still do. Now, in my mind, what would even be better is a guy who is a pass first playmaker first. Ideally a young Chris Paul, but that would.
Well, the old one's going to be on the market.
Yeah, the old one can still play, but I'd like to think that like to go a little different direction. I mean,
yeah.
So yeah, there's some guys out there, some guys that are kind of below the surface. That the two Jones brothers on different teams, Dookies, are pretty good players that would help this team. I think that might not be too hard to get. I love Scottie Pippen Jr. with Memphis. I mean, the guy's, he's getting a lot of time because, with John Morant, he's always hurt or suspended or something. But Pippen's a good one. I mean, I think Morant's going to be on the trade market, but I'm not sure. And I was just on radio just a while ago talking about I would rather have Trae Young than I would John Morant because I think he's a much better passer, playmaker, and he's available a lot more, and he's a much better pure shooter. And so and they're both bad defenders. So
yeah. Well, and I think you also don't have the off the court issues to the degree. That risk is not there. And even Zion Williamson, I know his name's been thrown around here in Sacktown. I mean, Jerry, is there a world that makes sense that you would risk the future of this franchise on a guy that can't stay on the court?
For Zion, I might.
Okay.
I mean, I think there is a world because just for this reason, I think the Kings are in a tough spot. And how are they going to get better? They can't get a lot better on the fringes. Zion can be a game changer if healthy, and if he could ever get healthy and stay healthy. Now, I know it's a big if.
Right. But
in my mind, this is, if there's ever a time when a franchise probably has to take a chance. I mean, a single's not enough. You're probably going to have to try to hit one out of the park. And I mean, it really goes back to the Weber trade. At the time, Weber was viewed as damaged goods because after his rookie year, Warriors got rid of him. Washington had gotten some trouble off the court and different things. And so, a lot the people, so all of his good stuff really happened here. And at the time, it was a risk. You're trading a proven guy, clearly on the downslide in Mitch Richmond, but it was if you don't do it, those 7-8 really good years wouldn't have happened.
I think that is such an excellent parallel that you made between a possible Zion move and a Weber. And I think, Jerry, we're going to continue to see, we've talked about this before, with this new CBA, teams taking swings and giving a lot less of leash to letting cores work out. They've got to make moves quickly and shake things up.
Yeah, and I think you see it with how, I mean, obviously the franchises are worth so much money now, and so much is expect. Players are making so much money, so there's less patience, which I understand. I mean, it's like with, it's hard for me to feel sorry for coaches who get fired, honestly, if they're making $7 or $8 million a year, and I think most average human beings would see it that way. You got generational money, and it doesn't mean that should happen, but clearly they're being paid for their services, however however short it may be. And the same way with players. So you go pay a player, sign him to a $200 million contract. Well, fans expect a lot back, and they're going to be less patient because of it. And you can't have it both ways. You can't get generational money and not expect to be not to think that a lot's not going to be expected of you.
It's so true. It's something that we take for granted, the amount of money that these guys are making. And to a degree, coaches are going to be asked to do more with less because of the more focus that you're going to have on drafting and developing players early in their systems.
Yeah, too, it's with the way the cap is set up too, and you get a couple of guys who can basically take about 80% of the money,
right?
Then all of a sudden it's so key to find the Keon Ellis's, really good young players, or like a Scottie Pippen that was bounced around. Ty Jerome with Cleveland now really is finding his way. But you got your stars, but you got to have some real productive guys on pretty much very minimal type contracts.
So I have not talked to you since last Tuesday when we were on the air. I know we texted briefly today. And speaking of young guys in the system, I flew out to Dallas last week, and Mason Jones was on my flight. It was one of those 5 a.m. early mornings. And if you've been around Mace, his energy is just electric, wakes you up. But he is motivated, Jerry. He is really working and hoping to get a look as an option as one of those guys that can continue to develop in the system.
Yeah, he really, the way he's played this year, it's a little bit like Keon, a different kind of player.
Sure.
But he is each year, he's really added to his game and the comfort level and the confidence he has. He's got quite a bit of game. I tell you, it's one of those things where I think the league knows it. He's done enough to where, he's I always say players, they're not just playing when they're playing G League. They're not just playing for the Kings, they're playing for the league.
That's right.
And he's done enough to get the league's attention, I'm pretty sure.
That's right. Reigning finals MVP of the G League. So, Mr. Mace, enjoy your couple weeks off. I want to take you back to this weekend. I've been really looking forward to directing the conversation with you this way. Your thoughts on the ending of the Detroit and Knicks game on Sunday?
Well, it's really embarrassing, to be honest. Clearly the officials blew it. He was fouled. He was a clear foul at the time. The ref maybe that didn't call it, or didn't call it. I'm not sure he had much of an angle on it, to see for sure. But But then the other two should have been able to see it pretty clearly. And so it's bad. I think I like the playoff basketball where they're letting a lot of stuff go, but I think they've almost gotten to let too much stuff. It's starting to almost look like, the 80s and early 90s, the fit level of physical play. And I think it's like, well, if you're not going to call any of this, if you're going to call this stuff during the season, you need to call it a little closer. Their hands are all over the guards, and you're seeing them get bumped 2 or 3 times before they even get in the half court almost. And but that's a shame. It's too bad that they can't, have the ability to go back and get it right.
Yeah, 100%. That's what I kind of wanted to get at, because if you look at the last 2 minutes of that game within the context, you could see why it was called a no call. The step back three that Cat had, he was fully extended. He had shoved his guy away from him to step back. And so I'm wondering, with the NBA moving so much more towards this physicality and Adam Silver not being secretive about it, Jerry, is the answer to solving the replay problem actually taking replay away?
I'm getting closer to thinking that in some ways, other than maybe, just have the replay in the last 2 minutes of a game.
Yes.
Basically, and be called by the officials themselves, or I and this guy, somebody
right.
caucus say, look at this play. Take it out of the hands of the coaches and everybody, and then last 2 minutes, because people say, well, yeah, but a missed call in the second quarter. Yeah, it does, but it really doesn't. I always said that officials will miss calls both ways, and it usually does equal out. But when it really kills you is when it's a game play,
Right.
And that's so. And I don't think anybody wants to see more replays to where, because easily you could have 25 replays a game, and as it is, it takes away from the fluidity of the game as it is. So I always in the end of games, there's so many timeouts anyway. That might be get it right, but get it, try to keep the game moving.
Yeah, I'm with you there. The last 2 minutes, I think that's spot on. I guess the other thing that comes along with that, Jerry, with the fluidity of the game is I think you would see fouls come down if you took replay away, because it complicates the way officials call the game. You know this from your coaching experience and playing experience. So many times you might have been fouled and hit on the arm and the ball goes off you, but the refs give you the ball instead of calling the foul, and the game keeps going. And it just seems like it fits back into the way that we remember fluid, fun basketball with teams with personalities, like you said.
Yeah, I'd like to say, I mean, the refs are going to miss calls. Players are going to miss layups. I mean, it's a human game, and you do want to, you want to do anything you can to make sure the team that deserves to win wins. And I think this would be a way of maybe helping that happen more often, as opposed to having a play overturned in the first quarter when it's 17-15. I don't, play, as you know, the fourth quarter is always different how they play, and especially crunch time, they play different. People can say they don't, but they do. And they always have. And it gets tougher to score hoops. It gets more physical. So that's where I think the focus should be.
Yeah, I'm completely with you there. And I think this is where that conversation really picks up. I think this is the exact example that needed to happen, because if that foul's called, there's no guarantee Detroit's winning the game. They have a chance to win the game. No more than likely, Hardaway's going to make a free throw to at least send it to overtime. But the difference, Jerry, of going back to New York 2-2 instead of 1-3 is everything when you're the underdog in that series.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I mean, it's clearly a missed call, and they admit they missed it. Well, that doesn't change. You're still 1-3 as opposed to 2-2.
Right.
And so that's, like I say, I think if anything they can do to focus on things that directly affect who wins and loses, do that.
I hear you. To fans that say, and I've thrown this out there, a fourth referee on the court, what do you say to that?
No, too many. I'm not all sure three's better. I'm so old. I remember when there were just two.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of the old guys, I mean, they controlled the game probably better. And, they'd miss calls. A Jake O'Donnell or Earl Strom. Yeah, I missed that one, Coach. I'll get you back on the next one. And and the truth of the matter is, it did. If you deserved to win, you probably would win. The three officials, I'm okay with it, but I don't see four. I mean, at what point? It's like football, as many as they got, and
so true.
And they still don't know what pass interference is.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And touching the quarterback. What's that? You can't even.
Well, it's like, dude, I love football and love watching it, but I mean, it's like the holding penalties and stuff. You could call that every play.
Right.
And not saying that but it's kind of like travel in basketball or carrying the ball. I mean, you could call it carrying the ball on every play, but they don't. And of course, I've been of a mindset for a long time. Change the rule. If you're not going to call it, don't have it.
Bingo.
It's insulting to have a rule that you have no intentions of calling.
Bingo. Okay, it's just a couple more questions and we'll get you out the door. I know you've probably been watching the playoffs. Any standout teams for you that are just really blowing you away right now?
Well, Oklahoma City looks like the best team, and certainly Cleveland. No surprise, the two best records have been dominant. But the best to me, the best series is one that I think we all thought would be is Denver and the Clippers.
Yeah,
and just great games, really good teams. Either one could win it. I honestly think the Clippers are a little better. They don't have Jokic. That's the thing. Overall, I think they're the better team, and I think they're the only team in my mind that could upset Oklahoma City more so than Golden State or the Timberwolves. But it could be wrong. I mean, but they had a lot of good. The Detroit New York series is good. Sadly, it should be 2-2.
Yeah,
it's getting to be fun, and when now after this first round's over, now you get into nothing but good teams, and so that's when it really gets fun.
it is having to deal with the baggage and the trouble of I shouldn't say trouble, but everything that comes along with a Draymond Green, Dylan Brooks during the regular season worth it for what they give back to the team in the postseason?
I guess it is. They're such kind of culture setters, and I mean they, it's like when you see a Warrior team, they're going to be really physical because they got Draymond. He's going to stir crap up, and Dylan Brooks the same way. He's less talented version, all around player, although he can score better. But truthfully, I wish the Kings had somebody like that was just not quite to that level. But I always call them, I think every team really needs what I call a shitbird. Somebody that's going out there and not gonna make friends with everybody. And I think that with the last few years, that's kind of a problem. The Kings, the players they have just aren't that type of guys. You can't make somebody that. They're either, that's the way they are. I mean, it's like, well, no, you couldn't create a Dennis Rodman. That's who he was. And
you'll never understand one unless you are one, unless you
Right.
played the game that way, unless that's your niche. Who were your shitbirds when you were coaching?
Well, probably the first year as an assistant and then later as an interim, Mark Oberding. I mean, he would sting you a little bit, and there were guys that were legitimately scared of him, and so there were guys like that. I probably told you a story about Larry Bird told me once about Lonnie Shelton, who played for the Knicks, a real 6'10", really fierce looking guy.
I know his son, Tim Shelton. Yeah.
And anyway, McHale was guarding him, and he was just kicking McHale's butt a little bit, in that particular game. Obviously not the same level player, and they had a timeout, and Larry said, I went up to Kevin, and he said, "Damn, Kevin, that guy's kicking your ass." He said, "Are you scared of him?" And he said, Kevin said, "Hell yeah." Why don't you guard him? And Larry said, "Hell, I'm scared of him too. I was just checking to see if you were."
That's coming from Larry, who's got the best poker face in the world.
Yeah, he wasn't scared of very many people. But I mean, there are guys out there, you see it in hockey.
The goons.
Now
Yeah.
you don't see it near as much now, but then, the Rick Mahorns and Jeff Rulins and those guys, they had a lot more leeway to lay some wood on you. And that's what Mark Oberding would do. I always remember he'd always say, close game, we'd always want Eddie Johnson to get the shot. And he said, "Coach, I'll get him open." And you could count on it. Now, when he screened you stayed screened.
You stay screened. There's no other option. Oh my gosh, Jerry, you are the best. Thank you so much for making time for us on a very busy day. I guess I'll leave you with one question about the Kings out the door. The Kings keep the current roster as it is, but get that point guard in that role that we've talked about. How many games better do you think they are?
If it's a clear upgrade at that position, I mean, they could be 2 or 3 games better, but I think they've got to get length, another long swing man type 3, 4, 4, 5, preferably 4, 5. I think to actually make any kind of a real jump in wins. So it's probably a 2-pronged. I think they've got to get 2 different guys than they currently have.
There you go, Jerry. You're the best. You gonna get your biscuits and gravy, right? Or not biscuits,
No,
gravy, chicken and dumplings. My bad.
I'm going to back off a little bit. I'm starting to pork up a little bit. I've noticed that I'm having to wear my pants lower at an angle. So I'm going to, Mrs. Reynolds has pointed that out to me. So I'm going to try to do a
she
little
pointed
better.
that out? Come on.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, kind of, I thought I was pretty sexy looking guy.
Especially when you got that Napier shirt on.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, I've still got, I got to bring that out once in a while.
Go.
That was a younger version of the Napes. He had a pretty good set of hair.
I'll tell you what, that T-shirt maker did him some favors. Not gonna lie.
He sure did, didn't he? Yeah, he sure did.
Oh my goodness, go get your walk in. Thank you so much. Can't
All
wait to
right,
talk to
buddy.
you next week.
All right, nice talking
All right,
to you guys.
thanks,
Take care,
Jer.
fans. See ya.
Just the best. Right, Wolf? Just the absolute best. I've heard that type of player called so many different things. Shitbird is not one of them. And I know that my son in the other room is hearing me say that S word, and I'm going to probably have to put something into a swear jar for it, or at least hear from him for about 10 times for me saying the word, but it was too good. That's so funny. Jerry is the absolute best. We are so lucky to have him each and every week here on the channel. And by the way, and good job, Tristan, trying to get the sarcasm in. It went a little bit over Jerry's head on that one. So best center in the history of the Kings organization, Sabonis, not in the NBA, but a very good parallel he made between Weber and Zion. I thought that was interesting. And the Pelicans are going to be a team that are definitely looking to probably go a different way with Zion. Has his off the court concerns. There's no doubt about that. He's got a lot of, you saw his most recent issue, I should say. You got to think about that, but then you do have to wonder if New Orleans has played it safe with him, knowing that that's kind of the golden goose. That is your investment, knowing he hasn't been able to stay on the court. What people forget, and it kind of ticked me off when I believe it was, and I love Katie. I understand many of you get frustrated with Katie, but on this particular night, there was a lot of focus, and it was this season, on Zion and him playing or not playing as much because of the shape that he keeps himself in. Well, he came into camp this year in the best shape of his life. So you can say that in the past tense, but to say it this season, that kind of bugged me for him. But conversely, the Pelicans were not letting him play back-to-backs, according to him. He wanted to play. They wouldn't play him. So there's probably some middle ground there where they know that time's coming up where that decision needs to be made. And we've said it, Sacramento's never had that player. You have never had that bona fide star. And usually for a small market to get one, it's got to come through the draft. So, I mean, if Zion becomes available, I wonder if the Kings throw their name in the hat. By the way, all those people that wanted Kuzma, look at what he's doing right now in the playoffs. Not very much for Milwaukee. He is just kind of blended in Milwaukee. Ja Morant coming up in the conversation with Jerry as well. DeMarcus Cousins, most talented. So remember that. if there's one thing you take from that segment, remember, Domantas Sabonis, best center in the history of the Kings. DeMarcus Cousins, most talented. There is a very fine line there. So, you know where else there's a line most times? But if you make a reservation, you don't need to wait in it. That's Bennett's. Go to Bennett'sRestaurants.com. 3 locations in the greater Sacramento area. Prime cuts of seafood and steak. And I'm directing you to the website for a couple of reasons. Go check out all of the different specials they offer throughout the week. Incredible deals, lunch specials, these new specialty sandwiches, also happy hour 2 to 6 o'clock every single day. You've got weekend brunch, 11 to 2 p.m. at all 3 locations, Howe and Fair Oaks, Roseville, and Rockland. You can get 2 entrees and a bottle of champagne for under $60. It's a pretty darn good deal right there. And other great deals. You can make your reservations right there on the website. And I'm not lying when I'm saying prime cuts of seafood and steak. The New York strip to die for. The ribeye can never go wrong. The redfish off the charts. And also, yes, this is going to stir up some controversy. The steak Cobb salad. Love it. All great stuff. So go check them out. And a huge thank you to Brian, Margot, and the incredible team at Bennett's for sponsoring today's episode of the King's Court. That is Bennett'sRestaurants.com. PK, buy your gift cards there and get your Mother's Day reservations. You don't want to be without that one. That's coming up before you know it. So what were your guys' takeaways from your time with Jerry? And by the way, there was no way I was going to go there with Jerry about the plane ride, about joining the club, about my grievance yesterday. First off, Jerry doesn't like to fly. That's first and foremost. So if Jerry doesn't like to fly, I'm not going to bring up flying to him. I don't want to make him anxious. I don't need Mrs. Reynolds there rubbing his leg to help him through the conversation. How am I supposed to set that up to Jerry? So Jerry, hypothetically, Jerry, you get put on a flight with a couple that is PDA right next to you. Hypothetically, what do you do, Jerry? What do you do? What's PDA? PDA? What do you mean? Oh, well, publicly display of it. See, it just wouldn't have worked. So, yeah, Jerry is scared of DC as a head coach. No, he's not. He is very much in favor of DC as a head coach. Everybody wants DeMar gone. I'm not going to lie to you. There's a part of me that wants DeMar gone for DeMar. I think DeMar deserves better than what happened this year in Sacramento. Now, you all deserve better from DeMar when it comes to his toe being on the three-point line. I will hammer that one. But he stayed on the floor for most of the season, played a ton of minutes, and really he kept the Kings. As much as I said going into that play-in game, if the Kings play at DeMar DeRozan pace, it's not going to work out well. He kept the Kings in that game and was competitive. I just think, though, if you're looking at DeMar and you're looking at could you get him off somewhere, you're rooting for like a Oklahoma City to lose. That's what you're doing. You want a team like OKC to lose. You want the Warriors to finish off Houston. You want like the East Coast teams, Milwaukee. Is that something they might be interested in if they're going to keep Giannis, right? Those are the situations you are looking for. Because you're not going to get a big piece or two for DeMar, but you can get probably a second back a couple of seconds back, and maybe an Alex Caruso. Think about how important that could be for the Kings. You don't want Van Vliet for tomorrow. You don't want that. You don't want that contract. But I think that the teams that are just one piece away, that are already all in, those are the ones that you're looking for to get tomorrow. If you're just joining us today, or at least if I am Scott Perry, that's what I am looking at. I am looking at those situations very carefully. If you're just joining us today, big news of the day, Doug Christie has the interim tag removed from him, head coach of the Kings. We talked a little bit about Shaq being the general manager. He's volunteering his services at Sac State. The next big steps for the Kings, definitely not the balancing test. Doug Christie building out his staff. Jerry and I are on the same page. I think most of us are on the same page. You need to get the yin to Doug Christie's yang. He's got the motivation. He's got the players part down. You need the bad cop. You need the X's and O's guy. Who's that going to be? I think Mike Brown would want to come back as the X's. Wait, that doesn't make it. I'm just kidding. But no, seriously, who does that going to be? I look at a guy like Terry Stotts. And for those of you that are saying Bobby Jackson, I don't think that's a great fit. I don't, because Bobby has worked his way up through the ranks, and he will be a head coach. He absolutely will be a head coach at some point. But I need somebody that has been a head coach right next to Doug Christie. So we will see how. Well, BJ, you can't take on any more bad contracts. You're already in contract purgatory right now, my man. That is if the Kings, what we talked about before, right? Before the Levine trade, we talked about, okay, it is either a reshuffle or it's a rebuild. You had two options in front of you. When the Kings decided, and Jerry and I were both on the same page about this, wait until the offseason. There was no rush. I don't think De'Aaron was going to be a distraction. If he was, send him off for surgery, and it's done with. You've got a healthy De'Aaron getting ready to come back for the next season. Monty McNair, here's the thing. This is why you know it was a Vivek move. Monty McNair never put a bad contract on the books. Now, you could argue with me and probably make a decent argument that I would agree with about Sabonis and extending Sabonis. When they did. You know, Sabonis is making almost $8 million more next year than Zion Williamson. How about that? Almost $8 million more than Zion. So maybe that was the contract. You knew you had De'Aaron coming up, but with either of those guys, it doesn't go against the cap. Like, it doesn't go towards the luxury tax if you re-sign your own free agent. So now with Levine, there is no, you are in an impossible position. And look at how many different areas you need to address. Trey Lyles, Jake LaRavia, Jay Crowder, Markelle Fultz, Keon Ellis, team option, Doug McDermott, Mace, Isaiah, and Isaac. I'm going to add one name to that list that the Kings, I really, really hope retain. And Jerry was right about the G League players not playing for the team, playing for the league. Unless you're a two-way player in the G League, you are signed to the contract with the G League. But I'm going to add Dexter Dennis onto that two-way list. If I'm the Kings, I am keeping a close eye on Dex. I think Dexter Dennis is probably, and do not take this, do not come away from this saying that Ryan said or Rhino said that Dexter Dennis is the next Keon Ellis. But what I am saying is if you had a similar type of player, a shitbird, like Jerry talked about, that's also very athletic, freaky athletic at times, and showed in the playoffs he could shoot the three ball pretty well, I would say Dexter Dennis is probably the closest prospect you have to what a Keon Ellis offers the Kings down in Stockton. Mace has completely changed his game around into a scorer. But I would add him to the list. I would like to see him be a two-way guy. So you've got not a ton of money to play with and a lot of spots to fill. So it is time for Scott Perry to get creative. I think absolutely. And here's the other thing. Jake LaRavia knows, and I do agree. I think you re-signed Jake. Johnny, since you are the Kings Court scout / GM, what is the max offer? There is something with Jake LaRavia's contract where the Kings are capped on what they can offer him. I think Sacramento gives Jake LaRavia the best opportunity for personal success because of Doug Christie and the way he coaches the team. Jake LaRavia, kind of your shitbird. We're going to start saying that now because Jerry called it that here on the channel. I don't know that every other team has the same role that Jake could have here in Sacramento. And the paydays for the marginal guys, the fringe guys, and Jake is one of those fringe guys, the payroll is not there anymore. It's not 10 years ago when these guys were getting 4-year, $77 million contracts. Just not happening. But yes, bring him back for sure. First apron, 195. And if Monk's 19, that's Dennis, man, dude. Maybe it's me, Dennis. Maybe I just can't read your comments. Teach Ellis to pass it or pass and run the team. As playmaker. Look, you got a multitude of guys that need to work on their handles this season, but Keon Ellis should never be your playmaker. That's not Keon Ellis's role. In fact, I would say that would throw off the balance of that unit if you're asking Keon Ellis to be the playmaker. You need a true point guard. Tristan had been saying this, or saying we could have gotten Pat Bev on the cheap. I don't want anything close to Pat Bev. You're throwing basketballs at fans. You're treating female reporters like trash, professional reporters, because they don't follow your podcast. I don't need that near my team. I don't. Maybe. Who do I like better? Dexter Dennis or Terrence Davis? I like Dexter Dennis way better than Terrence Davis. Not even close. Terrence Davis' stock is going down. Dexter Dennis's is going up. You already know what Terrence Davis is. You don't know what Dex is going to be. You don't. Missing Luka. Dude, again, my experiences from Dallas last week, it was incredible. Everywhere it felt we went, it was fire, Nico.
They're pissed about that. Oh, it's so stupid.
Too early to tell, BJ, because I don't know how to quantify the value of the second round picks that the Kings got. That will, time will tell that as we see another free agency period play out. But looking at the contract, looking at what you there wasn't I guess here's the thing. To me, there was not a move out there, including, and I was an advocate for trading Fox if it was the right move. And I don't mean the right move on behalf of the team. I mean, if it was the right deal. For me, trading Fox was what needed to be done. I was on record going back as early as last summer talking about that and saying it's coming up sooner rather than later. But for what you got back, the timing, there was not a player that was going to improve this team enough to take them somewhere this year. There just wasn't. So they should have waited. And you're going to have to, and here's the other thing. Let's be fair to Zach LaVine. I need to see Zach LaVine with a true point guard as well. Maybe that's going to change our opinion as well. And don't forget, Zach LaVine was predominantly healthy here in Sacktown in this entire season. Will that continue to be the case? Yes. Sign a lot of LaRavia love. Yeah, he's just here to hoop. I am all about that. Let's see. Resign Jake. Still getting a ton of those. Doug brings nothing to the Kings. Come on, dog. Dog. Do better than that, man. Doug brings value to the Kings. I'm sitting here and I've told you all day it's the right move. It was the wrong process. Ryan, Jerry would answer your question and give you the best answer you've ever heard in your life. It's about getting the setup there. You know, like I want to be respectful of Jerry's time, right? And I don't want to like gross out Jerry, or, you know, maybe Jerry wouldn't mind. You know, remember when we asked him about his plans for Valentine's Day?
People involved. And I think that, especially with the other scores on the floor, it probably needs to back off that a little bit.
Jerry, here's the question of the year. What should Doty be expecting for Valentine's tomorrow?
Just probably we'll just spend all day making love. You know what I'm saying?
Now, how exactly is that made, Jerry? Is it a baked recipe?
I'm going to get off the program right now. You guys have a good show.
You don't want anymore. You don't want to know it. Sometimes there's stuff you don't need to know. You know,
He's just the best. He likes biscuits and gravy. He can handle PDA. It's chicken and dumplings. I made the mistake there. That was on me. Zion's more tradable than McCollum. I agree. The Pelicans are in the exact same position with Zion, except it's a better player. Zion's a better, he's head and shoulders above De'Aaron Fox. Better. But De'Aaron Fox stays on the court. So the Pelicans and the Kings are in very, very similar positions. Where Jerry said, that would be the De'Aaron Fox trade could go down as one of the biggest trades in Kings history in terms of the way it shifts the direction for this franchise. That was your insurance policy. De'Aaron Fox was your insurance policy. And as we sit today, you bought out of your insurance policy early. Will the Pelicans make the same mistake? Probably not. They value, that is going to be their piece that can take them a different direction. Do you really think the Kings will get a big name? Look, too early to tell, number one. We don't have a full coaching staff together. Number two, we need to see what the clarifications are going to be when it comes to Domantas Sabonis. We need to see where the players are at. Doug Christie being the coach is a good step in the right direction for keeping Domas happy. The one thing I will say about Domas, though, is you'll never know if he's unhappy by the way he plays. It doesn't affect his play, but I think a lot of players are going to be weary about coming to Sacramento. You had Malik Monk, Domantas Sabonis, and DeMar DeRozan all step up to the podium on their exit interviews and say it was the craziest season of their careers. You think DeMar DeRozan, if a player picks up the phone and calls DeMar and says, hey, DD, hey, Debo, how is it playing in Sacramento? Is everything I'm hearing true? Like, you think Debo's going to give that stamp of approval on Sacramento? And I mean, I'm asking you to be real. And I'm not trying to put Debo into a corner. If you were DeMar, would you? I can't speak for DeMar. I don't know him, but going off of what we saw publicly, I don't know that my stamp of approval is on this organization. Cristobal, I wish I could fly you out, my man. Unfortunately, I cannot. I thought the most interesting, well, I guess I could, Cristobal, but this whole flying thing, Cristobal, I don't want to put you in that position, man. And I can't afford a PJ to get you out here. So, but you get out here, Cristobal, we'll hit up Bennett's for sure. We will do that. I thought the most important thing that came from Jerry and I's conversation was the discussion about replay. And is the answer to replay taking replay out of the game? A lot of what we discussed yesterday about having the eye in the sky, that the last 2 minutes of the game, eye in the sky that can chime in and buzz the referees and say, hey, mistake, send them to the free throw line, to the point where the refs on the court don't have to go to the monitor. That's done somewhere else, much like the eye in the sky in football. I think that it improves the accuracy of things and calls, not costing teams games and series, but it also speeds the game up. You heard what I said to Jerry about the nuances. This old school generation, any of these officials that have been in the NBA for 20 or 30 years, your Tony Brothers, all those OGs that you see coaching in the NBA finals, I bet you if you ask them off the record how difficult replay has made their job, they would tell you exponentially. Because like I explained to Jerry and Jerry verified, there's all these little things that Jerry said, we'll get you next time, coach. We'll get you on the makeup call. Think about before replay, how many times, if you're old enough to remember this, how many times would there be a clear missed call? And then on the next trip down the court, the call gets corrected. They give the ball back to the other team. They call like a travel. They call it 3 seconds in the key. They call it carrying, right? Well, now with replay, you can't do that. I think the product gets better. You won't have as many stoppages. I think the fluidity of the game will be better, and I think fouls will go down as well. You'll see some of that old school stuff come back into play, but it's impossible for them to integrate what they were taught, having Adam Silver turning the dial up to 10 with the physicality and then mix in replay on top of it. Just take it out of the game. Take it out of the game. Eye in the sky, last 2 minutes. Hell, even start doing it just for the playoffs. Do it just for the playoffs. So Tristan asks, who is the S-bird of the King's Court? There's a few of you. There's more than a few of you. You know this. So anyways, hey, don't forget Napes back 8 o'clock tonight. Join him. You're going to get his take on everything that went down today with the Kings. Doug Christie, as we expected, having the interim tag removed. He is now going to be the head coach of the Kings, so he can start building his staff out. That is the big thing. Can you get somebody with head coaching experience? Somebody, in my opinion, that has the X's and the O's, that can play the bad cop to Doug Christie's good cop. Can you get that? And what is the pitch to that coach if you're Doug Christie? The informal pitch is what Grant has said, that there's a very good chance you will end up back in that head coaching chair if you're Doug's assistant or you're his lead assistant, his associate head coach. So Grant will talk about that and expect a big I told you so. I think Grant put one out on the X earlier today, because if you have been part of this channel, you know we have been all over this and accurate from the beginning, pretty much all season. In fact, where is that girl that used to come in here? What was her name? I think her name was actually Karen. Wasn't it Karen? Come in here saying that we were spewing BS. We're making things up. Yeah. Where are you now, Karen? But make sure you subscribe. Would love to have you as part of the channel. You'll know when we go live. Give us a thumbs up. Would really mean a lot to us. And thank you for always making these shows great. Big thank you to Jerry Reynolds. Thank you to Bennett as well. Well, we'll see. Time will tell, y'all. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you. Mike, our mixture of John Cena and Tom Brady. What did he call himself? Franken Brady? Appreciate you. Bull. Now we're reaching. Holy, if we're talking about Bull, look at this. There is a heated Bull debate. Bull lacks defense and blocks. See, I'm not arguing. In fact, Johnny is. Have you ever seen those shows? I saw one on YouTube just a couple of weeks ago where they put Skip Bayless smack in the middle of like 20 sports fans that disagree with like everything that he's going to say, and he's got to defend his points, or he makes a statement and they all come up and they try to disagree, and you can vote the person out of the chair. What I'm saying is, if Johnny was the person in the middle, I would not want to debate personnel with him. Dude knows his personnel. So, can you ride a horse from Yuba City? All right. We're coming off the rails. We are coming off the rails. Grant will get you back on track here at 8 o'clock tonight. Appreciate y'all. We are back tomorrow, 3 p.m. here on the King's Court. Napes tonight, 8. Join him. He will have a lot to say about Doug Christie as the coach. Called it. We called it. Love it. Love all you. Love your passion for this fan base or for this team. And just keep being you, y'all. It will happen. We'll get there as long as we stick together. Go Kings. Light the beam. We'll see you on the flip side. Grant before that, though. 8 p.m. tonight. Court's dismissed.